Welcome everybody to the Haunted Hacker podcast number. Kevin, give me a number for this podcast.
It is, help me out here.
Between 150 and 200.
199.
199. That's a great number. Awesome.
Great number.
Podcast number 199. And tonight we have Kevin Thomas. Before we get started, I'll go over a little bit of news and what's going on in the community. We just finished our 1-year anniversary. Kevin was on that show with us. And I'm still editing some of that to post up on YouTube. Other than that, just got done speaking for DHS, and the next one I believe is going to be for a think tank in Europe, and a couple podcasts coming up for other people. With that, I'll go ahead and get started. Kevin, glad to have you on the show. I really appreciate you coming on and spending some time with me on the weekend. Why don't you give us a little bit about your background and who you are, and we'll go from there.
So I'm Kevin, and again, Mike, thanks for having me, and really excited to be here, especially at a medium like this, Haunted Hacker, and you really be able to express some of the views and be with some great friends. And my first introduction really to the entire group was last week during the annual celebration, and it really felt like home. It really felt like, wow, this is somewhere I can come and speak and not have to be judged and worry about what I say. And I'm with like-minded people. And it was very exciting. And I think what's really, really amazing here is the community that we have here with this podcast. I think the people are genuine. I think they have an amazing background, interesting group of stories that really made them what they are and defined them as human beings. And we do have that commonality. So myself, I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania, small town. And ever since I was a kid, I just loved to toy with, at the time, pre-internet computers, like the Commodore 64. And I got myself a 300 baud modem. And I ended up hooking up with a friend that taught me 6502 assembly and getting a bulletin board set up with this 300 baud modem. Friends are like, what the hell's the matter with you? Like, what is this stuff? This is weird. This is for geeks, right? And it went on and on and on. And I had many people saying, I'll never forget this. They're like, man, people aren't going to have computers. Only geeks have computers. This is something that's never going to catch on. This is really strange and weird. And, the sooner you accept that and get out of this world, the better you'll be in society and getting into some sort of a normal life. I don't know what a normal life is. That sounds pretty stupid. And I think back and I look to where we are today and wow, were they wrong? So I never pursued a technical degree. And I don't regret it, but I never pursued a technical degree. I was always in technology, but I went into business. I did a number of different jobs, and around 2000, I became a full-time musician, and I loved it. It was great. I mean, I got to be my own boss and play the music that I love, and it was great. And the money was good, and the money was good, and then the money wasn't so good, and then the money wasn't so good. I ended up getting out and helped build a background investigator team for federal government contractor, and did that for a while. Built a number of different teams. Got into HR for a while, and then senior HR leadership, and then most recently I got into where I should be, into software engineering. What defines me? So when I was one of the interviewers for a reverse engineering gig years ago, we had people coming out of school, computer science majors and even masters of computer science, and we'd interview them for a reverse engineering role. And as much education that they had, and they've been involved in many CTFs, they couldn't handle some of the most basic reversing skills in x86, or let alone ARM or even any other kind of microcontroller stuff. And eventually, I'll never forget, one of the interviewees was like, well, I went through school. I did everything I was supposed to do. How do I get started? Why can't I get a job here? Well, you can't meet the LCATs or labor cats. Mm-hmm. But what he said stuck to me. He's like, well, again, I don't get these skills in school. I can't find a book that teaches me what you want to do. So how do I do this? I didn't have an answer. So I thought to myself, I really need to, get serious about this and start writing a reverse engineering course tutorial. So for many years, I spent writing it from scratch. And today, if you Google reverse engineering tutorial, it's number one on Google. People like it. They like it. It's free. Number one, I believe in free education. I believe in universal education. But it takes you at the very beginning. It's not this very sexy hacker. This is where, what you need to do and exactly what you need to do and launch you into something in outer space that people can't keep up with. Right. It takes you into what is a computer? What does computer architecture look like? Et cetera, et cetera. But it slowly takes you through a progression, a story of how you can actually begin to understand the hardware and ultimately then reverse engineer at a very basic level. So that's where I spend most of my time. Today, professionally, I handle the develop integrations from a distributed system for a malware intrusion detection system.
Nice.
For a division outside of Comcast called Blue Vector. And in my free time, I teach. It's very important to me that I can do what I can to make sure there is opportunity for those that want to get into this field to do what they love. And that's me lecturing for quite some time. And that's it in a nutshell.
That's pretty awesome. So one thing that struck me, I was doing some Googling on my own of you and some of the music. The music is awesome, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I come from a music background as well. I played bass when I was in high school for bands and didn't take anywhere, but it was really interesting. And now I do some electronic stuff. But it goes to show that most people that have been in the industry as long as we have and do the things that we do have a creative streak. And either be, everybody I've interviewed either does, some sort of art, whether it be literature or drawing and painting or music or whatever. Everybody seems to have that knack for some kind of creativity. And I think that's really important in our industry. So reverse engineering, I got into computers about the same time you did with Commodore 64. I think I was maybe 12 when I got my first Commodore 64.
Oh yeah.
And I'll never forget it. Press play on tape and I had this game that was a psychology game, and you're talking to a therapist, and you're asking her questions, and she's asking you questions. It was just really interesting how that all worked together. And I miss those days. It was very simple, very simplistic. You didn't have to worry about internet connection. And then it stepped up to the 14.4 modem, which is what I started out with. Yeah. And it was really interesting times. I mean, it moved so fast from the time of, Commodore 64 to Windows 3.1 to NT to just Windows, period. But I was not one that took on to the whole Windows system thing. I wanted something outside of the mainstream. And I'm glad I did, because I got a chance to see the other side of the fence when it came to computing. So I haven't done a ton of reverse engineering. I recently did one for a financial company on an EXE that they had produced. And I'm still kind of working on that a little bit. But reverse engineering is one of those things that it takes a lot of in-depth skill. It's not just being able to run something through IDA or being able to do a behavioral analysis. It's understanding how the components and everything within a system works together, as well as the language that's used to communicate back and forth. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. When I ask some people what reverse engineering is to them, they tell me, oh, well, it's taken malware into a sandbox and seeing how it behaves. That's like a 10,000-foot view of the beginning of analysis, not even in-depth analysis. And you could go down a rabbit hole with reverse engineering. I mean, there's so much, and there's so many interesting parts to it. What would you say, like, your favorite reverse engineering job, like the best project that you've ever done with reverse engineering, and why it was so interesting to you?
So that's a great question. And I want to touch upon the art segment of it, because I think in a lot of ways, you do see this argument of math and computer science versus art and literature. Sometimes you might say, so I challenge that notion. The problem is we don't have enough people with the math and computer science that can think creatively, because having a great mathematical mind, computer science background is very, very important. But if you can't think creatively, it's going to be very, very hard to reverse engineer.
Right.
Or even engineering. And I don't think a lot of people talk about that. So that leads me to your question. I don't mean to get off topic.
That's okay. That's okay.
Probably looking at the SolarWinds attack. So coming from, I know binaries very well. I know, reversing C in assembly, and I'm feeling pretty confident this is awesome. And I hear about this SolarWinds thing, and I'm okay. I'm in late in the game, and I want to examine this myself. Mm-hmm. It's a .NET binary. It's a high level language. The source code's right out there. You get DN Spy, and it's out there. Well, this can't be hard. How do we miss this? Is it, arrogant? What's up with this? Started to look into it. The way that they took advantage of people's attitudes like I had blew me away. They would base 64 strings inside an innocuous update. It was called the Business Systems Update for SolarWinds Orion product. And the brilliance of it, once they infected you, when you ran the update, what appeared to be a legitimate update, it slept for 12 days minimum. Mm-hmm. No antivirus is going to find it. Between day 12 and 14, it randomized a seed to come alive and start enumerating the Windows registry to disable all of its functionality, but it wouldn't be persistent until the system admin actually rebooted the machine, so there'd be no flags. When the system came back up at a very point in time, it's then completely vulnerable. Then and only then will it start using encryption to start sending itself through a web shell and exfiltrating data that no one will ever know. Ultimately, FireEye was the first to catch this, and it persisted through many government agencies and whatnot. So what does this teach me? It teaches me that we are not as creative as we need to be. Again, I'm not going to downplay the computer science and the mathematics of it. I'm not going to do that, but it takes a certain level of creativity to think differently, to find something like this. And I think that's the kind of unique talent that we need today, is someone that, maybe has done a little music, done a little art, and has a little bit of background for computer science, that can look at a binary, be intimidated, or what would appear to be a higher level language, and you're decompiling it, but you're seeing a strange series of hash tables or base 64 strings, and being able to figure out what it's actually doing. We're in a different world today. It's a very challenging world. And I'm hoping all of us in our contributions can help inspire and train the next generation so that we can start to deal with these kind of things on a scalable level. So that was probably the most interesting thing, and it was as of late.
Yeah, absolutely. The SolarWinds attack was really interesting. And I knew when I first saw it, it had nation state written all over it, because of the fact that it was hitting some of the agencies and companies that it was hitting, and really exfiltrating data out of those places. And I've got my own theories as far as ransomware and some of the attacks that we see that we assume are commercial and financially motivated, but tend to be more intelligence driven and looking for specific pieces of data. But I always find it really interesting. I think the very first one that I did some behavioral analysis on and sandboxing and actually looking at the way it worked with the system was Impact. Impact was really interesting with the fact that it was keeping track of the countries and the IP addresses and the way that the system was behaving. I found it really interesting. I had never done any kind of reverse engineering before. I was always, focused on, compromising systems and the way systems behaved and operated. Wasn't really into the whole reversing part until I actually started getting my hands on malware. And I think at that point, I went through a lot of iterations of how do I collect as much malware as possible so I could reverse it. Because within that malware, I was finding attacks, I was finding exploits, and I was finding things that I wouldn't normally find in areas that I usually looked. And I think that's a brilliance of reverse engineering is not only do you get a chance to see how it operates, but it tells you a little bit about the person that wrote it or the people or group that wrote it. And I think that's super important today because there's so many different groups that are involved in developing this software and this code that you can't really keep a pulse on it unless you know signatures that you're looking for within that code that says, oh, hey, I know that developer, I know that group. So do you have any side projects or research projects that you do as far as like looking at all the different types of malware and maybe like keeping up with what's coming out and who's producing it?
Yeah, most of that is just pure research and experimentation. I have my own theory. So we have the Five Eyes, which are allied nations that share intelligence. I believe there is the equivalent of what I refer to in my CTF challenges that I create called the Dark Eyes. Mm-hmm. I think there are a very talented group of Russians, Chinese, North Koreans, I don't know what other nations, that are brilliant and coordinated, that have put together a lot of these techniques that have attacked us. And in a lot of ways, we are divided and distracted, and they are not. And I look at a piece of malware and I do try to find signatures or commonalities. What group wrote this? What is their vulnerability? What are they doing? And I do see a lot of similarities. So the media will have you believe that they're all distributed groups. They might be, who knows? I think there are a core group that share intelligence that are coming at us. So the answer to your question is I spend a lot of time looking at individual pieces of malware, being completely overwhelmed by the hashing algorithms that they're doing to, I mean, I can't statically reverse a lot of binaries today. You're unfortunately dynamically running them, and like some people can actually resolve the hash tables statically. I'm not that person. I have to step through it and see what it actually is. And I'm not terribly strong on Windows internals either, which is also sets me a little bit behind, which is also a challenge. But no, I mean, I continue to look at everything coming down the pike and trying to better understand what their mind is thinking. And I have a series of CTFs called the Angels of Death, which is part of our DC 540 DEF CON group that I put out to try to help people and educate them and get them working in CTFs that are kind of non-traditional to sharpen skills to try to contribute. But that's a great question, Mike. And I don't know if there is a real good way today other than just kind of look what's coming out and continue to be awestruck. And I would say to anybody new coming into this field, don't be arrogant, be humble, be hungry. Talk to people in this industry, learn, research, and try to contribute where you can. Because when you're coming into this, whether you admit it to yourself or not, you're overwhelmed.
Oh yeah.
This is an overwhelming field, and just understand that's good, that you should feel that way. But humility and patience, I think, will help you to better yourself and be able to contribute to this very, very critical industry.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And there's so many principles to dive off into. I remember I really got into malware and honeypots for a long time. Back during the Honey-D project, and then Nepenthes and Diana and stuff like that. Like I ran so many Nepenthes honeypots, and I just thought it was so exciting. When I would trap something and be able to take a look at the binary or look at the hash, it was just really exciting to me. It was like finding Easter eggs during Easter when I was a kid. It's just really interesting to see what's floating out there. And then I started developing and throwing out there some SCADA honeypots and some SIP honeypots. And the things that I was finding was just unreal. And a lot of people that I would talk to, oh, well, that doesn't really serve a purpose. But to me, it did, because it gave me an idea of what was actually going on behind the scenes. To be able to look at the trends and analyze, not only the types of malware or behavior, but time of day, and look at, who was doing what and what scripts were being ran to distribute this malware. And that's kind of what got me really into the career path, was messing with that, looking at how to break systems and really understanding the dynamics of computing and looking at how to defeat certain mechanisms. I think that's what really got me excited. But you brought up something that I thought was really interesting, is the fact that people ask you, how do I get a job? How do I work here? When I was a kid and getting into this field, we didn't have Google. We didn't have terabytes of data to sift through, and all the answers were contained in this big black 8-ball called Google. We had nothing like that. It was, you had to learn from friends or mess around by yourself. Or, even like literature wise, there weren't a whole lot of books. There weren't a whole lot of walkthroughs. It was literally just figure the shit out on your own. And I like that. And I wish that it was more like that now, because I do see a lot of people taking advantage of other people, as well as, really not putting forth the effort to go out and learn things. They either want to do it by osmosis, or be like, they're waiting for the queen to come knight them and tap on the shoulder with a sword. It drives me nuts. I miss the days where you actually had to learn what a tool was doing and why it was doing it, rather than just clicking something and it happens. And I think reverse engineering and some of that activity for me came from buying devices and plugging them in and looking at what it was doing, pulling up a sniffer and looking at what traffic was going back and forth, looking at log files. And really, as an industry, we've gotten so far away from that now. And I think we're dumbing ourselves down, because we have all these platforms that do that stuff automatically. And we're not having to go dig for that shit. We're not having to analyze it, because it comes up in his alert on the screen. And then the analysts go, oh, well, we have this going on. And the first thing I ask them is, what does that mean? And there's not a whole lot of people that can tell me. And I think that's really sad, because where we start out from I looked at it as an art form. We start out as a pure art, and we've gotten to the point where we've commercialized and bastardized what we used to do. And now it's become this commercial mechanism to where everything is automated, but yet we keep preaching education, but we're not enabling that, I don't think.
So that's really it, Mike. That is really it. So what do I mean by that? Automation is good, but if you don't understand what is being automated, first of all, how good is that? Secondly, if we just trust automation, well, if we're an attacker, we're going to very quickly, what is the automation doing? And don't do that.
Exactly.
It's that simple. Where if you're dealing with 100,000 individuals with a creative mind, well, you don't know what they're thinking. When you look at a half dozen to maybe less than 100 different automation platforms, understanding what their patterns of what they're looking for, it is easier to obfuscate. So when you are that analyst relying on simple automation and not understanding what's actually going on, it does put you at a significant disadvantage. And that's a very challenging thing because, again, like, we don't emphasize a lot of critical thinking that is art and music and science together, and just saying, what is this thing doing? Talk about it in a very non-technical level. Well, it's doing X, Y, and Z. It's enumerating this, it's doing that. Okay. Are these patterns that you've seen before? And start talking about it from a more abstract way, rather than just relying on tools, to then really generating and pushing forth a mindset of people that it's okay to think outside the box, because that's what we need to do if we're going to really combat this. This isn't, as much as I love engineering, where you're given a set of requirements and you develop on C, Python, Java. No, this is, you don't know what you're dealing with, figure this out. Very different. And I'm with you, Mike, because I don't think we foster that kind of environment for whatever reason. I'm sure that we both know there's many reasons, but
right,
that's what's going to be our downfall if we don't start training people to think and look at things holistically rather than through the eyes of the tool. Again, automation is good. Automation is good for maybe de-obfuscating some encryption algorithms, or doing some grunt work when you're doing a static analysis or something, but just relying on something on its own to tell you what you need to be is that's part of the problem.
Oh yeah, big time. And one thing that I find a lot of interest in, a function, a principle of cybersecurity, is incident response, because you're doing a level of reverse engineering. You're trying to walk back the steps that the attacker took, and why he took them, and where he took it to. And I find that super interesting. It's very physically taxing because you're up for days on end trying to help people out, but the information you get is so interesting. But to get people to think like an attacker is another issue I've always had. Coming from the attacker background, I naturally have that, I guess, that mentality. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know, but it's just something I was born with. But that's one thing I have a difficult time teaching people is, when I have an analyst or when I have a pen tester and saying, okay, this is the environment, what would you do? How would you do it? And they give you the obvious, like, pre-canned responses. There is no like really diving down deep and getting into the nuts and bolts of why they do what they do. And to me, that's the biggest part of reverse engineering that I don't think is an industry we've mastered, is reverse engineering the mentality behind the attackers, and why they write the code, and why they write it in such a way, and why they demonstrate and execute the way they do. And I think, and this is just my theory, is until we can get a handle on that, it doesn't matter what tools we have, what kind of automation techniques, what kind of defenses we have. If we can't really truly understand the attacker and reverse engineer the mindset, we're losing.
Right. So to really add on to that, and this is a perfect example, some of the future challenges that I'm going to be writing for the Angels of Death series, I'm going to be doing these all in assembly. And some of the things that I can do at that level is put in custom pieces of code at the assembly level that when you step through it, it's not going to be an obvious exception handler, but it's going to break you out of the debugger. Mm-hmm. When you're writing in C or C++, there are a number of structured exception handlers that you will be able to find in assembly, particularly Int3 is one of them. And there is some obfuscation you can do, but you can just simply patch them out. When you understand and master assembly, you can write things that you know the CPU is going to trip up on, and you will embed that. And I'm talking, Mike, I'm talking about giving some secrets away, but counting instructions and comparing EAX, for example, or, you know, some of the general purpose registers to a number count. When you go through that, you're not going to know what that is.
Right.
So if I'm able to break the debugger, you're forcing someone into static analysis. And if I can also, which I can, break the trace, it makes it near impossible to dynamically reverse a binary. So then what are you stuck with? You're stuck with manually stepping through something that could take weeks. There's a perfect example. You know, if you think creatively, you might then say, well, maybe I should look into this and understand there might be some techniques that you could do at the assembly level that might be interesting, and understand those patterns to get ahead of it. That's just one example. I just wanted to give, I don't want to bore people to sleep, but that's one example, right, of some obfuscation techniques. And I worked through with a number of people the Flare On Challenge of 2021. Absolutely brutal. And we saw a lot of this where it's like, oh my God, how are we going to get through this? But luckily, those were still written in C or C++, that it was hard as it was, they were still known ways that we can break through it. But again, not to blabber on, we have to start thinking, looking at things independently and thinking more creatively. I would, in the computer science, I would probably require some music classes and or creative writing courses for the computer scientists. Maybe public speaking, I don't know. But we have to start integrating that left brain into these curriculums if we're going to win, because that's the only way we're going to get through this going forward, in my opinion.
Oh, I totally agree. So when I was in the military, I was getting paid extra money to go to school. I was getting like $1,000 extra. And I was taking courses like science courses. And then I was taking like literature. I took Russian literature. I took psychology. I actually took a course called The Psychology of Death and Dying. Just things I found like super interesting. But I think that it requires that level of, I guess, drive or interest, right? To be able to look at a situation and approach it from all levels, right? From a creative standpoint. You know, I went to art school for a while. You know, it's just different ways to solve a problem.
Yeah.
And I think that you know, everybody has their own opinions about certifications and, you know, requirements. But I think that certifications in a way has narrowed a lot of people's minds to a specific small area, right? And, oh, we require this cert, you must know this. So they're focusing all their attention on this on the minutia of what that job really encompasses. I mean, look at all the soft skills it requires to work in cybersecurity. You have to be able to communicate, you know, you have to be able to write, you have to be able to look at things from a creative standpoint. But yet all that these companies are requiring are a minimal of a certification. So, I mean, at what point do we say, hey, we've micro-focused down way too much, and maybe instead of just requiring certification, maybe we require some sort of, you know, training program, whether it be arts and literature or science, something outside of cybersecurity, because we have a tendency to think, oh, well, cybersecurity is the end all be all of everything, and we just have to focus on this. When really, if we put those skills and those classes and that creativity to work, I mean, no telling how good we could be as an industry, rather than just focusing on the minutia.
So case in point. So let's say, Mike, you and I are in Moscow, and we've turned to color, and we happen to be big Pink Floyd fans, and we understand there is certification Z that makes you a cybersecurity expert in the United States. So three things we're going to do. We're going to drink. Okay. And then when we're not drinking, we might sleep a little bit, maybe eat a little bit. We're going to learn what those certification is for Z. What are they looking for? What are they teaching?
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to deliberately go around every single one of those corners, and we're going to have so much fun fucking with them.
Yep.
Because they're thinking, we're going to play with them though, because we're going to give them breadcrumbs of what they're expecting. And then we're going to have fun as we circumvent them and bring them down paths that they'll never work their way out of. And we might use some of our own Pink Floyd references, whatever, it doesn't matter what band, references that we're going to have fun with. We're genuinely going to enjoy ourselves, and they're going to struggle. If you bring somebody in with a fresh mindset that maybe doesn't understand the engineering very much, but this technically sophisticated person is talking through in a non-emotional way of what's happening, and they see different sort of things. And if you think creatively, you might actually start to be able to say, these people are screwing with you. They're taking you down this road. This isn't where it's going. Right?
Yep.
I mean, it's a far out.
It makes sense though.
Example, but it's right.
It makes total sense, you know, and as attackers, we do that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the funnest things I did when it came to hacking was trying to get into a company, right? And I would look at their job postings and the requirements. And within the requirements, I knew exactly what version of systems they were running based on what they wanted you to know to have that job. So, I mean, they were doing all the work for me, and I would actually go in and interview for the company, sit down and quiz them as much as they're quizzing me. And by the time I walked out, I already had a roadmap for the entire network. But people don't think that way. And I think that's a huge downfall in our industry. That, and, you know, I don't know how many certs I've seen that are in English as opposed to, I mean, is there a lot of German certification companies? Is there a lot of Russian certification companies? Nobody hears about it, right? I mean, I don't go to, you know, Moscow and get a CEH. They don't need a CEH. But they're so much more well equipped for what they're doing. I mean, if you look at success rate for, you know, let's say North Korea, Russia, when it comes to compromising networks, they're doing something we're not. And I think a lot of it has to do with creativity and the environment. I know in North Korea, they have specific units for attackers that they go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I used to remember the unit number. There was a series of unit numbers that they would focus on that, but you're right.
Yeah. And most of them work under gunpoint. I mean, it's not a job. It's a requirement. Like, that's your life. But yeah, I mean, there's certain things in our industry that I completely disagree with. And certifications, I think, is one. When you go to school, you know, you even start out in like primary school and you move up to, you know, intermediate, high school, college, you're not taking one course, right? You're not graduating these different levels by taking just math. You're taking everything. And it requires that to be able to function in an adult world. So I've been racking my brain trying to figure out as an industry where we decided that model did not work and that we only take that one course now.
I think, again, it's really integrating radically different courses. So you're an art, you spent some time with art. I haven't, but I know a little bit about art. So if we were to walk into a computer science curriculum at the graduate level, and you and I are rolling in a fake Picasso and a real Picasso, right? I don't know the shit what I'm talking about, but you will. So you're gonna make me look good, right? So I'm pointing out some of the differences that I see between a fake and a real, and other people don't know, right? Like, here's what the real one is. I could be lying to them, but you would be able to look at the differentials, and it is mathematical. It's mathematical. It's not what you would think is math, but it is mathematical. You're analyzing the binary, the painting, in a way that others may not. And it's, again, it's that creativity. Or if you think music, you hear your favorite guitarist or your favorite music.
Yes.
You will notice a tonality or a guitar signature. Like for me, it's AC/DC. Like you will hear the signature, and I know what that is.
And
or
the cadence too, the timing.
The cadence.
Yeah.
And, did they put deliberate stops in? But this is no different in malware. It's no different.
Right.
It's no different. But you would never hear a computer science curriculum ever talk about anything we're talking about right now. They're like, God, a bunch of crazies.
Right? I think that's why I made such quick advancement in cybersecurity. It was the fact that I've never taken a computer course. I had to learn the things by myself and through my own discovery and really trying to understand, like to try to get to where I thought everybody else was, because I put everybody else up here because they had all these degrees and they were so smart. When they talked, it was just so elegant. I was so rough around the edges, and I thought, man, I'm gonna have to work my ass off to catch up to these guys. And I did. I really tried hard, and I still think that most of the industries up here, I may be like right below the top. And I think that comes with a little bit of imposter syndrome, as well as, I just don't have those qualifications. And I think it's such a horrible thing that we do to people in the industry, is require them to be this or be that. Why can't we just accept for, what they do know in their mind? Because to me, I can take somebody who doesn't have a degree, who doesn't have tons of hours of college in computer science, and make them a great hacker or a great defender, just based on how they think. And because really that's all it takes, is being able to understand how they process and how they troubleshoot. I remember I went to a interview in Redmond for Microsoft, and it was for a position that I was actually going to be a supervisor and a manager of code scrubbers. So they would do the code scrubbing. They would give it to me and say, hey, what do you think about this? Do you think it's ready to go and be released, or should we put it back in production? And so I'm thinking ahead of time, going, oh my God, I've got to learn all these things. I've got to make sure I know this operating system inside and out. I really feel like I'm at a deficit here. So I fly up there, and I go to the first interview, and the lady's sitting in the room, really cluttered room. I mean, her office was shit. I mean, there was stuff everywhere. And she asked me a question. She says, I'm thinking of an object in this room, and it's your job to figure out what that object is by asking the least amount of questions. And I thought, what the fuck have I done? I've sat there and poured over these books for months trying to get ready for this, and it has nothing to do with what they're asking. But I think that's the beauty in it. Like companies like Microsoft and Google, they don't care what certifications you have. Yes, it's a requirement, but they're more interested in how your mind works. And I think that as an industry, we've completely lost that. We're getting very binary. We're looking at, if you don't have a degree, if you do have a degree, if you have a cert, if you don't have a cert, it's either on or off, 1 or 0. Life's not like that. And the internet is definitely not like that. The temperament of the internet is definitely not on or off. It's chaos. Right. So, I mean, I don't think we're equipping the industry for the right type of defender or the right type of scientist. I think that, we're falling behind in that. And I don't know what the answer is. We supposedly have a skills gap, but I think the real skills gap is the hiring process. I don't think it's the actual people. I think it's the requirements. And I preach about this all the time when I look at an entry-level job that's posted, and they want you to have all these certs, they want you to have all this experience, and this is for an entry-level job. Like, what happened to, why don't you come on and spend 90 days learning what we do, and we'll let you go and see how you do. There's no more of that. They want a for sure answer. Can this job be completed by this person? And, failure is part of success. And I think companies have forgotten that too.
So let's break that down a bit. So let's say I'm getting a degree, whatever degree, and a series of certs. So it's a degree and series of certification. So I get the training to make sure that I pass these tests. I may learn, I may not. Who knows? I don't know. You may learn, you may not. Who knows? But once I get to that threshold, I sit my ass down on the couch comfortably, open up myself a big bag of nachos, and I'm just going to town, and I'm watching people like you struggle, looking at people like me saying, I should be, I'm not saying me and you, but I'm talking in general.
Right.
You've achieved this, you should be this. There's an arrogance that comes with that, and there's a hunger that comes from humility. And you're right, because it's the people that are out there struggling to try to get to that level, and they're going through non-conventional means.
Yep.
They're going to be thinking differently. They're going to be forced to act differently and manipulate differently and evolve differently than the person that was given a certain track. So the person that's in job A and you're trying to get to job A as well, you may not get there because you didn't play that game. And ultimately, this person's getting their ass handed to them in the job because they aren't thinking creatively anymore. Or maybe they never thought creatively to begin with. Today and going forward, we're going to be dealing with drones that are going to be delivering packages, not people. It's unfortunate. We are going to be dealing with drones that are going to be assassinating people. We are going to deal with automated weapons and automated personnel who knows what that looks like. Automated vehicles that are going to, the future, like it or not, is going to be very, very different. It's going to be very, very technical. But if we're going to start thinking about a defense, we have to start thinking creatively on how we can get creative solutions to that. So, you know, just try to, without getting into a long lecture series, I just wanted to point out that mindset. I am like you. We're hungry to learn. I want to learn. I want to keep learning. I'm hungry to learn. I'm humble. I want to keep learning. I don't know everything. I get into a new situation and I'm overwhelmed, and I admit it. But I want to learn, and I want to think creatively. You know, when I'm looking at a challenge, I'm thinking about music. I'm thinking about art. I'm thinking about all sorts of shit that, you know, may drive my mind here or there, but, you know, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that's very similar, that kind of thing. Oh, maybe that's applicable here, rather than just staying on focus and checking off boxes. I don't know if we're going to get there, Mike. I don't know. I don't know how or what we do to fill the engineering gap, but a lot of it is in hiring, and people don't want to take a chance on someone that's an unknown.
Right. Or not orthodox, you know, they're unorthodox, and they come from a background that may have a challenge or hurdles. One thing that you pointed out, the drone, I actually read about the UK is going to have the first driverless drone to transport people from point A to point B. And it's like a helipad, and they're building it in London, in Canary Wharf, which was like not very far from where I was living. And they're so far ahead. Like I just, you know, when I see that, and I'm like, you know, I remember when I was a kid watching the Jetsons was my favorite cartoon as a kid. And I remember the cars and the robots and all this shit. And here it is, you know, 20 years later, and I'm like, man, this shit's really happening. Like my dream cartoon is coming real. Like it's becoming real. I watched a show today. I may have downloaded it or pirated it. I won't admit to it though. But it's called Free Guy, and it you know, it has Ryan Reynolds in it, and the whole gist of the movie was they were in this game. It's sort of like a Sims game, and all these players were focused on killing all the NPCs, the non-player characters, right? And this non-player character was AI and started developing feelings and developing this thought of, hey, I don't want to be an NPC. I want to be a player. I want to live. And so he fought against the game maker. It was brilliant. And I spent like an hour and a half watching. I was just like, you know, I can see stuff like this happening down the road, you know, and I think we're at a very exciting time for the industry and for the world in general. I mean, the internet brought us closer together, whether that is dangerous or good or bad or indifferent or all the above. It brought us closer together and made things easier. But at the same time, it's forced people to become more intelligent. is force people to develop quicker and develop skills that we never had to have before. And no telling where it's going to take us. I think it's really exciting. When I look down the road, I hope that I'm alive when cars are no longer touching the ground. That's what I want to see. But like you said, it's going to take that creative mind. It's going to take people like Elon Musk, the non-orthodox, the crazy rich with a wild sense of imagination and creativity to create that environment. If you would have told me 10 years ago that we would be talking like this through a computer, or maybe 20 years ago, if you'd have told me that I was going to be talking to you through Zoom and we were going to record this, I would have told you you're fucking crazy. And I'm sure the rest of the world would have too. But now look what we're doing. It's amazing. So I just think it's really exciting. And I think that, this conversation has really hit home with me as the force of creativity and innovation. And without creative minds in the industry, we're going to get stagnant. And I think we're getting to that point because if you look at the defense mechanisms that we have, they're not a whole lot different than the first IDS. They have a little couple bells and whistles and algorithms thrown in there, but it's still the same type of product. But we need more creative minds in the industry to push us even further.
So that I'll also go into this as when we started the conversation about how refreshing it was to meet all of you and be a part of this. This is a community where people that are new into this can come in here and ask questions and not be afraid of being judged. And this is what I'm interested in. Point me in a direction and we're not going to chastise you or whatever, and you be free to go forward. I think these kind of things, like what you've developed, Mike, with Kim, and it's a real, genuine grassroots movement of technology. It is not, I don't begrudge corporations trying to make a living. I mean, God bless them, but it's a genuine space where someone can come in and feel like a family member and being able to grow and share. And I don't think you see a lot of this. I think you see a lot of groups that are either trying to sell a product or a byproduct of a corporation arm, but they're not a genuine grassroots movement from a technological standpoint. So I think there's great value in what you have. And I'm hoping others will join us so that they can come in and, again, not integrate with us, but expand us. Share the knowledge, share some crazy fucking ideas that might be radical or insane, whatever.
Exactly.
But, maybe we all learn from it and maybe we become better. And maybe we then can say we are this group that thinks very differently. And we start talking about real life events and publishing them. And people are like, fucking people are crazy.
Yeah.
But then they were right. I'm gonna go check this out.
Exactly. It takes that craziness to really innovate, right? So my two idols in the world, one's dead, one's out in left field somewhere, but Einstein, people thought he was mad. People thought he was insane, but he was the most brilliant, And I have an actual painting on the wall of Einstein because when I walk into my flat, I like to be reminded that, hey, at one point people thought he was nuts, but now we look back and go, man, he was like shit, And my other idol is Elon Musk. Yeah. As crazy as he may be, as off the wall and eccentric, he knows what he's doing, and he's doing it from an unorthodox standpoint and an unorthodox method, but it's fucking working. And people, what I found really interesting with both of them, right? Elon Musk, people have tried to tear him down his entire life, right? Discredit him, try to get photos of him smoking weed with somebody. I mean, things that humans are fallible. Humans make mistakes. Humans act like humans, but they tear those people down, even though that they're brilliant minds and they're innovators. They are what keeps us moving in the right direction. But people get so sidetracked with shit. And that's what kills me about the industry is, when somebody gets compromised, a company gets compromised, we're not looking at, and I hate to say this, and it may sound bad to companies, but some of these attacks are beautiful. Like the way they're orchestrated. I mean, you just have to sit back and admire it. when I was doing an IR and one of my friends called me up and he was working on the same thing. He said, you'll never believe this. They actually went to the Nimble and was encrypting the Nimble. Like, I was like, that's beautiful. Like, there's not, I mean, I just had to laugh. I was like, okay, well, it's a new game,
Yeah.
but I don't think that everybody looks at things the same way that I do, or maybe that you do, or whoever. But I think we need to understand how people look at things and try to relate instead of tearing people down, try to relate and try to evolve as a group,
So that's the thing too. So when you mentioned two people, Einstein and Musk, two things they had in common. We talked about checking off the boxes and sitting on the couch and being comfortable and stretching out and life's pretty good. I am the shit. Neither one of these individuals, as powerful and as influential as they are, what do they do? You look at Musk. He's up at 4 a.m. He has a ritual of learning, humbling himself, continuing to learn, continuing to progress, stay on target, stay focused, keep learning. Einstein, again, same thing, keep developing, keep fighting with Niels Bohr and his colleagues, but keep running the race. Long distance runners rather than sprinters.
Yep.
Two things they had in common: dedication, humility, wanting to keep learning and being creative. And that's very hard because most people want to be able to, unfortunately, check off a number of boxes, sit back and just let the love flow. But this ain't the business for it.
No, and I mean, I know for myself, like if I had to recreate myself, I don't know how many times, I would have that 9-to-5 job making 180 grand a year.
Yep.
And then something would happen in the industry or with the company or with me, and I would have to start over again. But I've always found it interesting to be able to start over again. Like this job, I took a huge pay cut going to this job, but the people I work with, there's no way that I could find the same people ever in one place. And the job itself was super interesting and challenging, right? So I'm learning something new every day. I'm running a blue team at the same time helping out the red team and doing incident response. Like it's everything in one. And to me, that keeps me going. And I think another thing too that makes people successful is the fact that they don't look to master something. They don't accept the fact that they've mastered or they're an expert in something, because there's always so much more to learn. And I try to study everything widely, right? Not just defense, not just offense, not even just cybersecurity. Right. I still do art and I still mess with electronics and music. And to me, when you're learning with everything across the board, every little principle that you're involved with seems to get better and you seem to advance. So I think that the industry is really interesting, but I think the people are what make the industry interesting. And I think the grassroots and sort of the, I hate to say it, it's kind of like a 60s fuck the system type attitude that actually makes shit work.
Kim mentioned something in chat, it's their art. So I think going back to some of the things we talked about, when the enemy is putting together an attack, it is their art.
Art of war. Yep.
And they know our rigid structure and they take great pleasure in exploiting that, because they don't have those bounds. They are artists. Yep. But none of us think of it this way. We think of, they're going to do this and you should expect this and you should expect nothing.
Right.
Expect nothing. Go into every challenge expecting nothing, looking at what the facts are, not being blind that, this looks like a familiar pattern, let's just keep going down. No, think about what this may actually be. Again, I keep going back. I think there's hope. And I think there's hope because of groups like ours, and hopefully we'll have more of these like we had at the annual celebration. We can all come out and bullshit, share ideas, be crazy, be stupid, be inspired by each other and think differently. I think, again, this is the beginning of how we actually combat this in a real way.
Yeah, I agree too. And I think that, you brought up the 1 year anniversary and how we all got together. And that's something that I think that, I mean, it was awesome. And I think when I first got involved with like DEF CON used to be that for me. DEF CON used to be that place. But over time, it's become so commercialized. It's become so, I guess, mainstream, that it lost that original, genuine feeling to me, And I think that, we were talking during the anniversary, maybe we'll put something on. Maybe, we'll do a haunted conference and just do it, here in Chattanooga or wherever.
Yeah.
And just get together and brainstorm and just build shit, and that's what I enjoy. I enjoy like learning what other people are doing, their research projects and asking questions and why they're doing it. And I think it's so important to have that camaraderie, but in a non-commercial, non-corporate manner, because corporations and the industry puts things in boxes, and I'm a round peg, and you can't shove me into a square box. So I need to be somewhere where I feel free and I can create. And I think a lot of people are like that. But yeah, I think it's going to be exciting for the group. We've gone through different revisions and rebuilding and restructuring and trying to figure out where we're headed as a group. And I think that just this conversation alone has really given me a lot of insight into my own thinking and where I think we should be going. And it's going to take people like us to go that direction. It's not going to be, the people that are handing out certs and stuff like that, or corporations. I think it's going to have to be, people, actual genuine people. But dude, I appreciate you being on the show. Like, it's been a blessing. This conversation we had, I think that I've been wanting to have for a long time. I'm glad you were the person to help me with this. I love your ideas, and I think we should have some more offline chats and see where we can take this.
Definitely.
So
I want to thank you and Kim for really welcoming me, and I'm excited to be part of the family, and just keep pushing the bar forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
What the hell happens?
Yeah. So before we go, is there any questions you want to ask me or about what I do, or about the group, or anything in general?
I think what I'm just really excited to see where we're going to go. Right. I want to see us grow as a family, and how we can get others. Like, I take it back to the beginning of our conversation, where they were so frustrated in an interview. Like, you're trying to challenge me on things that I've never been trained on. You give me, I'll learn. I'm not lazy. Just point me in a direction. Let me, how do I learn? Right. I think group like this, if we can continue to get our name out there to people that want to get into this industry, invite them in, let them tell their story, let them feel comfortable. That builds confidence. Then they grow. We learn from each other. I think, honestly, that's the solution, Mike.
Absolutely. I think letting people be themselves is key, and understanding that people, we're all human. We may think differently. We may come from different backgrounds. We may not make everybody happy all the time, but we're still humans, and we still have the same goal. Nothing changes. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to more conversations like this in the future. And that's it, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Kim. Talk to you guys soon.
Talk to you soon. All right.
Take care. Bye.